So I recently switched my main operating system from Windows 11 to Arch Linux. And by doing that, I also switched my VR system from SteamVR to SteamVR on Linux, obviously. And since I have a Valve index, I can use it on Linux natively because it is supported on Linux through SteamVR by Valve. But in this video, I will show you all the hoops and all the issues that SteamVR on Linux still has and that I have experienced, and also how you can make it somewhat usable. But let's start with the good things first. So you can just go on Steam and head on the SteamVR page and just install SteamVR like you would on Windows. And you can go into a library, and as you can see here under the tools section, there you have SteamVR. I'm currently running the beta version, so you don't even need to run like an alternative version of SteamVR. You can run the latest version that is available on Windows as well. And I can show you if you go on the Properties tab here. And on the Beta tab, you can see I'm running the current SteamVR beta update. And I suggest that if you're running this on Linux as well, that you are running the beta, because you get the newest features first. And if there are some patches for Linux, you will get them earlier, and it's just a better experience in my opinion. But you can also use the stable version of SteamVR. And if you click here, you will also see that there is a Linux build, but that is version 1.14, and we are currently at version 1.22 something. So that is a pretty old build, and I wouldn't suggest that you use that version because it's not really that good to use in my opinion. I've tried it, but I didn't really like it, and if I see no reason in using it. So if you have no issues, you shouldn't really use the old bit. Just use none or the beta version of SteamVR on Linux. And that's pretty much everything you need to do if you're running on Xorg. So if you are running a regular distribution that does not ship with Wayland by default, which is most of them at the moment, then that's all you should need to do to get SteamVR running. But if you are running Wayland and have an issue starting SteamVR, I suggest watching another video on my channel where I showed you how you can circumvent this issue. But now that you have SteamVR running, I can show you basically what the feature set is on Linux. So it's pretty limited right off the bat, and I will show you what I mean in a second. So if you go into the settings right here, you can see it's pretty much the exact same as on Windows. You can set your refresh rate, your brightness, but here's the first thing you will notice. Motion smoothing is not supported, so that is not supported on Linux because I can't use asynchronous reprojection on my system because I'm running Wayland. If you're running Xorg, you may actually be able to use that, but I've heard that motion smoothing is not supported either. So here it says it's not supported on this GPU driver version, but it should be. But yeah, that's an issue that is hopefully getting resolved in the future. So just be warned that you may or may not be able to use motion smoothing, which is pretty bad if you have a lower end system. But if you have a high end system like I have, then it's not that big of a deal. And I've just set my refresh rate to 90 Hz. So in most games, or in all games I've tried, I always get a 90 FPS. So it's not that big of an issue, and I don't need motion smoothing. But yeah, it's currently an issue on Linux. I don't really need to dig into all these settings because they're pretty much the same as you would be used to on Windows. The only thing that is broken is the camera section. So you can enable the camera, but if you do the camera test, it always fails, and that's a known issue. So the camera isn't working inside of SteamVR. There are some third-party scripts that can make the camera work, but not in a 3D view. And it's just kind of a workaround, and it's not natively supported in SteamVR on Linux. So you can forget about the camera feature. But if you just play inside of virtual reality like I am, it's not that big of a deal, but it's still kind of a bummer that the camera is not working, because You can use the camera as a webcam, for example, but it's just, I don't know, not embedded in SteamVR and it's not recognized, so that won't work. So the next thing is, as you have probably already noticed, the base stations are not lit up. The headset is, but the base stations are not, and that's because SteamVR on Linux does not support the Bluetooth module inside of your Valve Index or your other VR headset. And therefore it doesn't turn on the base stations when you turn on SteamVR. So if you go and click onto the base stations, and yeah, it's kind of broken here, but if you go into the base station settings, for example, it just says please enable Bluetooth, view Bluetooth settings, Bluetooth is not available. So you can't really do anything about that inside of SteamVR. But what you can do is use some third-party scripts for that as well. I've made a video on that on my channel, a really extensive one where I can show you I have shown some methods that you can use to activate the base stations when you start SteamVR and when you close it. So you can work around that and it's pretty reliable, but it's just not integrated in SteamVR. So out of the box you can't control your base stations, and you need to control them in some other ways. Another annoyance that is standard on the Windows version of SteamVR is that audio switching does not work by default, so or at all, I mean. So if you start off SteamVR, it will just use the microphone you have on your PC and the your other output like your headphones or your speakers. So if I go into my speakers here, you see it's on my speaker, so that's my headphone. And it's also on the microphone that I'm recording with. So if you start up SteamVR, you will have to make the Index microphone your default device and also your HDMI or DisplayPort audio, so that you get audio on your headset. So you will need to do that manually every time. And if you close SteamVR, you will also need to set it back to your default audio. So this is also really annoying. There are some workarounds for that as well, but I didn't get those to work on my system. But your mileage may vary. I also have linked or talked about that in the Lighthouse Space Station Management video. So this script also takes care of that, but that didn't work on my system. So out of the box, you will have to do it manually, or and you can't even do that inside of SteamVR because another thing is the desktop view is broken, but I will show you that in a minute. So you will have to change that manually, or if you use the audio control widget I've showed in another video, you can do that inside of SteamVR as well. Alright, so here I am inside of the SteamVR home environment, and as you can see, everything works perfectly fine. Everything is fluid, smooth. I can teleport around. I can stretch out my hands and the boundaries will show up. You can see the controllers here. So everything works as expected. So even if I turn my fingers, I'm using the index controllers here. You can see the finger tracking works without any issue. And that's pretty cool. So, but if you now open the SteamVR overlay, you will see one issue is the pointer is the whole controller is kind of rendered behind the menu, which is a little bit weird and distracting. But the dot is still at the right place, so you can select stuff, you can do whatever you want inside of here. So it's just a cosmetic thing, rendering thing. And you also see like the icons, or the icon here is missing, and sometimes these icons also can go missing. So it's a little bit wonky, but it works at least. And you can also see inside of this overlay the controllers. They look weird as well, and they have some rendering issues, so they look like they are rendered inside out or something. You can at least see the battery status on them, so that works. But they look a little bit out of place. But inside of your applications, of course, or if I return to home, you will see your hands normally and it won't affect the usability of the controllers. It's just inside of this menu here. And you also see like, if I go here, you see this model here actually looks good. So I don't know why this looks so weird. But that's just, I don't know, SteamVR on Linux. things. Another thing inside of this menu is the desktop view. So if you click on that, you get a black screen because I am on Wayland, so I get a black screen here, and it doesn't work. Most of the time, I don't even get a black screen. It just says straight up, no desktop available, but this time it's just showing a black screen. So I can't control my desktop inside of virtual reality, and that is also a big con of running SteamVR on Linux, because it's just frustrating. You need to take off your headset to do basic things basically all the time. But I mean, if you don't really use the desktop inside of virtual reality that much, then you can still use it, and I do as well, so it's definitely possible. But if you're running on Xorg, you actually may be able to use the desktop view, but it's still not perfect, and I've seen videos of it where it's not really working like it should be. So on Windows it's definitely way better. You can just hit it and do everything on the desktop. And you also have the same buttons here, and if you go on the volume button, you can't really control the volume as well. So here you can see the icon is straight up missing, and these controls don't do anything. So to get this control button, I suggest you watch my other video where I showed you how you can control your audio inside of SteamVR on Linux, because that's not built in by default. Alright, now let's get to the actual fun stuff. So the gaming, and in the background you already see me playing Half-Life Alyx. And Half-Life Alyx is one of the only VR native Linux titles that you can play, so you don't need Proton or Wine or any sort of compatibility layer to play Half-Life Alyx on Linux. Even though on the store page of Half-Life Alyx you see there's no mention of a Linux build, so there's only Windows available. But if you actually download Half-Life Alyx, it will download the Linux build unless you force it to use Proton, which I don't I wouldn't really suggest you do. So just download Half-Life Alyx and play it, and then you will be using the Linux native build. And as you can see in the background, it's running perfectly fine. You see the performance monitor as well, and custom workshop maps work. So in this example, I'm just going into the portal mod, and this works without any issues. So I also played some other workshop maps, some of the more popular ones, and they worked without any real issues. So Half-Life Alyx is a great title, and it's enjoyable on Linux as well without needing a compatibility layer. So that's really nice. If it works, then it works. So another great example is Beat Saber. As you can see, the performance is great. I mean, Beat Saber is not a particularly graphically demanding game, but I'm running it through Proton, so just the newest version of Proton 7. And no tweaking required, it just worked out of the box. Performance is great, and I could even play multiplayer games, single player games of course. Sound is working, and it's just a great experience. It's like you were playing on Windows, so no difference really. And I was playing at 90 Hz, but you could select 144 Hz, and it would probably run just as fine, but I don't want to switch it all the time, so I just wanted to run it at 90 Hz, and that's not really an issue. So Beat Saber is approved. But there are also edge cases where the game runs perfectly fine, but then you'll get to a point where you run into issues. So for example, in Wanderer, a very well-made virtual reality game that came out recently, I could play like the first hour of the game without any problem, and as you can see in the video, the performance is great, and it looks really good. It was possible to play at ultra settings with FSR turned on. But after like 1 hour of gameplay, I ran into a scene where I needed to play a video inside of a TV in-game, and that didn't work because there are some kind of issues. with the video codec or the video player inside of the game, which is based on Unreal Engine, and how Wine and Proton handle it. So basically the video wouldn't play, as you can see in the video in the background. It just stays black, and that blocks the progress in the game, because this should trigger a video which triggers a scene that you need to progress. So these things can happen, and if they happen, it's kind of a bummer, because otherwise the game performs really well, and only because there are some issues with the video playback, you can't continue the game. And then there are also some games that do not run at all. For example, I recently tried to play Stride again, and it's a pretty simple game actually, and it ran before, but I think after an update of the game, or of Proton or something, it completely broke, and now I can't play it anymore, or it will crash or freeze my entire system. So those things can happen as well, and that's a really annoying thing that can happen. But and I've also tried to do several things to fix it. So sometimes you can try out different Proton versions, or install some kind of media foundation workaround. And in some games it actually fixes the problem, but in this game I couldn't really get it to work reliably. Or I can get it to work, but then after I close it, my whole system freezes and something. So yeah, some games are not really that well optimized to run through Proton. And if you're ever unsure if a game you have or you want to play actually runs on Linux or performs well, you can always have a look at protondb.com. And here you can have a look at how a given application or game performs on Linux. So for example, if I search for Tower Tech, that's a VR game I also own, then you can see here there's a gold rating, and I've also written a report on that. So if you want to follow me, you can read my reports. I will do a report on every game I play. So that's not only VR games, but many different games. And actually a lot of people, or at least some people, do reports on VR games on Linux as well. So you can see the hardware specs, and you can compare them and see how it runs for them. And Tower Tech, for example, ran great on my machine, but I needed to do like a small tweak to fix an overlay issue. But for example, if you want to look at another game like Half-Life Alyx, if I can type correctly, here you can see Half-Life Alyx has a silver rating because it's a little bit tough to get it working. For some people it works right out of the box. For me, I need to add a no-vid option to get it to work, but after that it was great. So yeah, your experience may differ if you run a different distro or have different graphics drivers, graphics cards, CPUs, and all of that. But Half-Life Alyx actually has a native port, and here's like the message that says it has a Linux build that is not displayed on the store page. So ProtonDB is a really great resource, and it's really nice to get information on if your game will run on Linux. Another great page to check out is the SteamVR for Linux issue tracker on GitHub. And here you can get some information on what works and what doesn't, and you can also check out some issues that other people have. So as you can see, there are currently 248 issues open on the GitHub page. So yeah, that's like it gives you an estimate on how good the port actually is, and like how many issues there are, because there are a lot of issues and some of them remain unfixed for a couple of months, years, or however long. So Valve employees are sometimes commenting on these issues, but most of the time they will go unfixed, which is pretty sad. But as you can see on the page, it says it's a development release, SteamVR for Linux, so it's intended for developers to create content for SteamVR on Linux. But it works to play games as well, so you can use it to play your games on SteamVR. But that maybe explains why the support is lacking and the features are lacking. So the effort is not really going into that mainly, but it's just supported so people can actually use it on Linux. And I appreciate that because no other VR headset or no other VR headset device from another manufacturer is supported on Linux. So with the exception from the old HTC headsets. And I really appreciate that Valve supports Linux, even though the support is kind of lackluster. Then there's also the VR on Linux Gitlab page. This one is more of general VR on Linux, so not only SteamVR, but also some native VR implementations and OpenXR and AR even. So it lists just all the kind of games that are supported, all the actual VR gear and hardware that is supported, unofficial HMD support for the mixed reality, Oculus Rift and PSVR, for example. But those are not really that well supported on Linux, and I wouldn't really use those. So they also talk about the ALVR support that you can use to play Oculus Quest games wirelessly. And they have a bunch of links to tools that could be useful. So I will link this also down in the description below, and that's a great resource to look into. So that pretty much sums it up. To conclude, I would say that SteamVR on Linux is definitely usable, but it has a lot of rough edges and it does not get the kind of support that the Windows version does. So if you are planning to switch to Linux and want to keep your VR headset and occasionally want to game in VR, I would say you can go for it. I mean, I'm doing the same, but just make sure that you have a Valve Index or an HTC Vive or Vive Pro, because everything else is just not going to be a good experience on Linux and is not supported. So if you have one of those headsets and are debating on switching to Linux, I would say do it. I mean, it works. And with a couple of third-party tools and scripts, you can get most of the functionality back. So I will make more videos on the channel, like explaining the issues. So there are a lot of issues that I haven't talked about in this video. And I will talk about those in some future videos.